Today's topic is a tricky one. Do we really want to live longer? Do we really want to live longer? If you're thinking right now, come on, Felix, that topic is as old as humanity itself, and the answer has always been a variation of, yes, of course. Let me tell you, I thought so in the beginning, but it's much more complex than that. The topic is in full hype mode right now. I'm sure you have witnessed that. And the hype is fueled by so many, by researchers, by billionaires, by influencers, by creators, by people from podcasters to politicians all around the world. What does that actually mean, though? What does it mean for you? What does it mean for the planet? And what does it mean for this community, for Foresight? That's what we're going to tackle today. And I'm glad that I'm not alone in kicking this off because the topic is going to be deepened at the Dubai Future Forum in November by thousands of futurists and foresighters, where longevity for the very first time is a key pillar, a key part of the program. So to kick us off today and let us know why, one of the lead curators of the forum is back on Horizons, a former diplomat, lawmaker, and researcher. She is here to take us into the topic. Isabella Pirolo. Isabella, bienvenuti. It's great to have you with us. Welcome back.
Grazie, Felix. Thank you so much for having me again on the podcast. I love to be here. I love to see everyone from all over the planet. Yeah, we are 2 months away. We're so excited. We can't wait to welcome people in Dubai. And you're right, longevity is going to play a very big role in the forum this year. It's going to be part of a new track, brand new track, that is optimizing health. And we've decided to add this topic to the Dubai Future Forum topics, not only because, of course, health is high on the agenda all over the world, but also because we wanted to see the role it plays in the way we look at the future. And we're going to look at health in a very holistic way. We're going to look from the future of the pharmaceutical industry to epigenetics, planetary health, and yes, we're going to deep dive into longevity, what it means to have a longevity society, what longevity itself means, what is the framework for it. So we're going to look at this topic with speakers from literally all over the planet, from Singapore, European Union, US, and all the way to Japan, Okinawa. So
Wow.
Very excited about it.
I mean, I have to say, you never shy away from asking the biggest questions that are out there. Are you actually sitting in your 3D printed office in Dubai right now, Isabella, or where are you joining from today?
I am seated right now in the 3D printed office. It's a fantastic place. You can't see it, unfortunately. You can just see part of it. And this is more like a spaceship, I would say, than anything else. But yeah,
You are definitely on a spaceship, you guys, and I admire what you do. So, Isabella, as you're about to deepen this topic with so many people in Dubai, what are you actually hoping to get out of the session today?
Well, today I just hope to enjoy the conversation from these two fantastic speakers, first of all. And I think we're going to see a mix. I don't want to spoil what we're going to see now, but I expect to hear more on trends, to hear more on how health is fitting into the perception we have of the future. What is the connection between having a hopeful thinking of the future and what is the connection between how we perceive longevity, depending on the generation we're part of. And then very curious to hear more about the new technology, but also the new behavioral changes that you can apply to your lifestyle in order to have a longer and healthier life. And I suspect Dean will help us with that.
And we already had Manish mentioning in the chat, people who exercise regularly can gain over 2 hours of life expectancy. Can. But what does that really mean? And how does it play out across your life when you really have an impact on your body that's connected to longevity? That is also what we're going to discuss today. And it's time to welcome our, I would say, Isabella, co-speakers to you, because we want you to chime in across the session as well. First up is a biomedical engineer based out of Singapore, where it's evening right now, where he currently serves as professor at the National University of Singapore and heads several institutes dedicated to health at the school. after doing groundbreaking research around longevity. So glad he's here because AI, personalized medicine, all the topics that Isabella just mentioned, he's doing it with his own body, with his own mind, with his own research. Professor Dean Ho. Dean, it's an honor to have you on Horizons. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Dean, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I've actually been on travel and to Europe and then back over the past couple of weeks, and I used it as an opportunity to kind of gamify how I could not actually have any jet lag and to really achieve some sleep goals all the way there and all the way back, and it actually all worked out really well. And so I will be optimally energized for the discussion today.
Just one more question, personal. When was the last time you ate something?
The last time I ate something was maybe about 10 hours ago. I generally eat lunch and then I'm done for the day. So it's been a few hours. So this helps me get better sleep.
You're a fascinating man. We will dive into this in a minute. Before that, I would like to say hi to our second guest today, a critical futurist and strategic foresight consultant with over 20 years of experience exploring possible, probable, desirable futures with clients all around the world. He's based out of Berlin, where he studied future studies. He led 2 foresight and strategic design studios, and he has observed longevity for over a decade. Johannes Kleske, it's an honor. Willkommen to Horizons, Johannes.
Hello, everybody. Good to be with you.
How are you today?
As usual, before these kind of like sessions or talks, I like to do breathing exercise.
Oh,
Just
nice.
like classic box breathing. The funny thing is, so I've been doing this for a couple of years, and it really helps me to like balance like the nervous system between like the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system, which basically means I'm focused, but I'm relaxed. And at some point, I
Sounds
actually
wonderful.
started to do this with my audiences, like when, especially like you're at a conference, the people have heard 4 talks before you, they're like almost falling asleep, and so I actually have like an animation in my slides at the beginning, and if you want to have an almost spiritual experience, have a room of like 100, 500 people breathing in synchronicity. That gets you to a different place.
Wow. Okay. So I can already spoil that we have a moment of Zen in our session today, a little breathing exercise for everybody. Our mindfulness guide is actually on the way into the session. She'll be here in a few minutes. So for now, I would actually like to do some other kind of breathing, because now that our guests, our speakers are all on stage together, I would like to invite everybody here, and it's a full Zoom room, to all come on stage with us. How are we going to do this? Liz, our fearless producer, is going to switch off the spotlights. So whenever you have a camera, you can switch it on, it feels comfortable, you'll be on stage with us. Also, if you have a microphone in front of you and you want to hit that unmute button, please do so. Let's crash Zoom together. Let's say hi to one of each other. Let's say hi to our guests in whatever language you prefer out there in the world. Hi, Horizons, be loud. We want to hear from you.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi,
Good
namaste.
morning.
Hi guys.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Hi everyone. So good to hear you.
Merhaba.
Yeah.
Let's kick it off. Many of you have submitted questions while signing up. Thank you so much. We'll weave these into the session today, and you can always use the Zoom chat to comment, use the LinkedIn chat to comment, and also ask more via Menti across the session. For now, I'd like to go to Johannes first, because Johannes, I want to start with sort of the umbrella, like zooming out a little bit, meta level. You have observed longevity as a science, as a trend, as a hype, as a field of emerging technology for over a decade. So when I ask you, do we really want to live longer, Johannes? What do you say?
Just a big disclaimer before I get into that, just so you know my perspective. I'm a middle-aged, middle-class white guy from Berlin, Germany, so keep that in mind. And also keep in mind
that undertone. You know, don't be sorry about it. I mean,
no.
It's
just
here.
like there's a lot of perspectives on here. This is, I think, is important. So this is important that there is a lot of perspectives on there. And I think that's the beauty that we have here, that we can have a look at that from different perspectives. For me, it's also important. This this is a very special topic because it's not just, oh, we're researching health. It connects to every one of us. Like we might think, oh, we learned something about health in general, but it's also like, what do I take away from this? Will this add life to my years, as we've been joking before? So just to give like a quick overview, I thought about, should we start this with, well, death? Because that's the thing that we have here in the background on this topic. We've always, I think, as a humanity, have been very bad with death and endings in general. And for a long time, that was basically the task of religion to help us with this. Oh, we can't do anything about it, but it doesn't end there. There's a life after death. And then we had, and to make it really short, modernity kicked in. Technology and progress came along. We're like, maybe that is not the end in this life. It doesn't have to be. And we even like 100 years ago had like Russian cosmoism who said like, starting from like the intersection of technology and spirituality, maybe we shouldn't die. This is like actually our spiritual task of us not dying anymore. And they actually been a huge influence on transhumanism. And I think this is where a couple of years ago, like 10, 15 years ago, or even 20 years ago, like it turned from transhumanism, like a very nerdy topic. We actually had a lot more like breakthroughs in research, and we saw that this getting more mainstream. This is like something that a lot of people are interested in. Maybe we can cheat death. And that, again, it turned away from a very spiritual or almost religious approach to maybe age is a disease, and aging is something that can be cured. And we've seen a lot of developments in that. But then I think what's happened, and to sum up the discourse that we've seen over the last couple of years, is why? We're always coming back to the question of, so yeah, we don't want to die, but why? Why do we want to live longer? Like, and I think that's always my answer, or asking a question back, like, why do we want to live longer? Because living to 120, when the last 30 years of your life, you're connected to machines, you're barely alive. You're living, but you're not really, or you're alive, you're not really living. You're asking a question like, is that really worth it? Or something that's mostly missing from a longevity discourse that's becoming more prominent again, what good is it to live a long, long life if we're living in a world of climate disaster, of everything around us becoming more dystopic? And I think we're seeing the discourse around longevity changing from the mere question of how do we live longer to how do we live quality life longer. So it moves from lifespan to health span. I think that's the big change we're seeing. How can we have a healthy, qualitative life for as long as possible? Doesn't mean that we're trying to extend life endlessly, but we want to extend the qualitative years much longer. So that would be
Got it.
my answer.
This is great. And this also ties in with questions that were submitted by you, the community, beforehand. I actually put a little vote in our WhatsApp group before. And how can we close that gap between lifespan and health span was one of the questions that was upvoted the most. And I think we're going to talk about this today. But before that, Johannes, thank you for this overview. When I asked you, what would you like to know from everybody in the room today? You again, and I think this is the Berlin scientist in you, you said, let's go basic here. I want to know, what does longevity mean to you? So we're going to put this out there right now as the first community question of today from Johannes. We get basic here in the beginning of the session, and we just ask, what does longevity mean to you? To respond, you either click on the Menti link in the chat, or you pull out your phone, maybe if you're on LinkedIn right now, and just scan that QR code and let us know, because we're trying to build a word cloud here. We're trying to get the hive mind together. We're trying to get as many responses as we can just in a matter of minutes here. And Johannes, why are you asking this question? Why are you so basic around this?
So this is a trick question. and I'm giving it away before everybody answered, but so for me, as a critical futurist, I'm always interested in how we construct futures and where they come from. And so longevity, by its very design, is always a topic about the future. Like we're interested in longevity because we want to basically extend our own future. And I think being more mindful, more aware of what influences our own image of the future. How do I picture myself in 30, 40, 50, 60 years has a huge influence actually of how I behave in the present. And so, because I really believe what like Fred Pollock, the famous sociologist and futurist from the 50s said, it's our images of the future that pull us towards them. And so by just
okay, kind of our own personal foresight.
Yeah, it's like reflecting on, so what do I actually think about this? How do I imagine myself as a healthy older person? I think it actually makes it more tangible for us and thus more able to actually get there.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at what the community is responding with. There's a lot of talk about what you just said, the health span versus the lifespan. There is a lot of talk about privilege, of course. And thank you again for saying that in the beginning, where you are, who you are. I was mocking you, but of course, it's very serious. It depends where you live and how you grew up in terms of how you look at that topic. And there's so many beautiful answers. Is there anything that sticks out to you, Johannes, when you look at the Menti responses, this cloud of thoughts from our community?
Yeah, there's the one being completely at peace with the idea of death. This jumps out at me because I think that to a certain degree is the journey that we can be on. It's like, because I think we can, like, especially when we look at the broader perspective around longevity, there's a lot of like very tech focused, like how can technology help us to live longer and things like that. But we also in the last couple of years learned that there are different approaches to that. And we've especially seen it with the whole research about around those so-called blue zones, like where certain areas like in Okinawa and the Sardines, different other like zones in the world where people for some reason live much longer than other people's or other areas around them. And they looked at that, and it's fascinating because the longevity discourse is all about like, what can we do to live longer? And in the blue zones, they live longer and they're trying to find out why are they actually living longer? And it has a lot more to do with like social factors and a feeling of purpose. And so I think like I had to smile about the idea of like being fine with death. I think that's a journey where you actually become so at peace with yourself and the way you live, and not trying to reach something that actually at the end, like you leave in peace, and that actually might be one of the most amazing goals of a long, healthy life.
But actually, I think, Dean, this is a perfect moment to bring you into the conversation, because if I remember correctly, you have been even in touch with one of the blue zones in Okinawa that is going to be at Dubai Future Forum, represented by scientists, but you also live in one yourself right now in Singapore. So Dean, when you hear this, when you hear what Johannes just said, and when you just saw what was shared on Menti, do you sort of disagree? Do you want to challenge this?
I actually want to agree. I think that no matter how we look at it, people are living longer. It's just, especially in the blue zones, but generally speaking, and we look at life expectancies, and as Johannes mentions, I think for those of us who are looking and doing research in the space of kind of health span and lifespan, we have a responsibility to try to accessibly innovate ways for people who want to close that gap between health span and lifespan to do so. And I want to emphasize accessibly. And being in a blue zone, I think that we learn, right? We learn about what could be some of those driving factors that work. And I think not all of it requires massive income. I saw a comment about, is it reserved for the very wealthy, for the access to ways to live longer? But if we look at Singapore and we look at Okinawa and Sardinia, and yes, some of it relates to diet, and there could be accessibility issues there. But we also know that building deep relationships, the ability to walk, and have specific exercises that don't require access to the top techno gyms on the planet, it really is a combination of factors. And it's a combination of factors that works best for each person. But if we really dig deep into it, I think there's this, for those of us who kind of are in the tech space, there's this misperception that lengthening health span has to be really unenjoyable, or has to take a lot of effort. But I think that's not necessarily the case. And it's really looking to our surroundings to make sure that we pull out these kind of accessible resources that are there to really help us close that gap.
Interesting though, because this question you just tackled, will only the rich live longer? It resonates in the chat. It was submitted beforehand. A lot of people voted it up, but you're basically saying not necessarily. And the regions around the world, so-called blue zones, where people reach the triple digits more often than elsewhere, are proof of that to some extent. But Dean, I think you're also proof of that. You went on your own longevity journey. Why did you personally become obsessed with this topic?
Yes, I think right now there's a lot of popularity around people who are kind of looking at experiments on themselves. I think we're at this, coming from research and innovation, we're really at an unprecedented time. In the past, if you wanted to do research, you needed a lab. You needed a lab with sophisticated equipment. But with the advent of social media, with digital, we're at this phase where people can go and buy supplements and go and try to fast and try different exercise techniques to try and increase their health span. I embarked on a journey a while ago because my lab primarily works in AI and digital medicine, where we view every individual as hyper personalized, right? Where we don't use big data using our approaches. We actually have a very unique approach we developed where we use only a person's own data to manage only their own care. And I emphasize dynamically. We change over time. The best intervention or solution for us today may be different next week, maybe different a month later. And we believe that we don't necessarily want to use millions of people's worth of data to try to figure out what's best for me, because we have issues of bias. We have issues of access, right? The access of the people whose data may be used to guide my care could skew things substantially. So I set out on a journey to quantify my own dynamics, to understand how my own metabolism changes over time, and the flexibility of my own metabolism through blood measurements as a function of my fasting regimen, caloric restriction, exercise, and diet. And it's been fascinating, right? It's been fascinating. And I did this full well understanding that different people have different access to equipment, but I actually really wanted to just understand how deep of a response my body could have purely off of my decision to get up and exercise, to not eat super late into the evening, to maybe calorically restrict actually for a prolonged period of time, and to really just understand the role of behavior in seeing fairly immediate changes to my metabolism. And eventually, I didn't need a lot of this equipment. Once I learned what I learned about myself, it wasn't a matter where I was escalating the type of testing I was doing on myself. It was a matter of me really understanding myself so well that I really had total ownership over my physiology, et cetera. And I published it. I certainly share my own data on social media, etc. And we come from academia. We believe in evidence, right? We don't practice kind of this absolutism of just saying, look, this is the easiest get rich quick way to prolong your life. We are big on evidence. And I ended up publishing in a peer-reviewed paper in a good journal about myself. And it actually went through multiple layers of approvals and then ultimately through peer review to be published. And so I believe that evidence can show that we have more command over our biological outcomes than we think we do.
And for everybody who follows you on Instagram, for example, you can also see that it has a very personal background for you. Your partner, your wife, became very ill, and she's a neuroscientist, you're a biomedical engineer, and you went on this journey together. And maybe also for you, it was really a push to say, I need to be the one in the household that, you know, is going to be there no matter what. And you managed to then now be one of the first scientists whose personal data was actually used in many different studies. So this is really groundbreaking, what you have been able to achieve. And just to understand, Dean, to what extent this has an impact on your personal life, we heard in the beginning that you don't eat for most of the day. When was the last time you took your own blood?
I actually was a couple weeks ago, but actually today is Monday. Starting Wednesday, I won't be eating for at least 2 days. And I'm going to be embarking on a before and after kind of lipid dynamics test where I try to understand the dynamics of my lipids and other cardiovascular markers. And I actually take repeated blood measurements to look at key biomarkers such as ketones. By the way, not as a function of the keto diet. I'm actually not eating for these few days, but to understand how flexible, how adaptive, how agile is my metabolism as a function of exercise. Like I actually can exercise even though I'm fasted. And within seconds, actually, you can see changes to your biomarkers, which I will see starting this Wednesday. And just alluding to what you mentioned, you know, my wife was diagnosed with a brain tumor 6 years ago. And being a PhD neuroscientist, I think she really had a deeper than usual understanding of her challenges. And people have different motivations for why they want to boost their health span, why they may want to live as long as possible. And for me, it was an unexpected kind of necessity to be as healthy as I could. I will add that my wife actually is very healthy. She's a 5-time full marathoner, right? And so to imagine what she went through was an exercise for all of us. And then about a year ago, she was diagnosed with a spine tumor, right? And she went from wheelchair bound to, you know, standing on her head every morning doing yoga again. And she actually puts to practice some of the work that we do because of, you know, neuroprotection from ketones, et cetera, to reduce some of the side effects that she still has during her recovery. Again, for us kind of being practitioners and researchers in the field, we do this to really hammer home that biology works. Again, to reemphasize, when people fast, when people choose to maybe have 1 less drink or 2 less alcoholic drinks, you know, the impact can be profound.
And we have seen in the chat and also in the questions that were submitted that it keeps being a societal question that we're up against. And you brought a question to everybody in the room today as well, Dean, that I find fascinating. You want to know what scares you the most. And this is to everybody here who is in the room right now or on the LinkedIn live stream. What scares you the most about the inevitability of longevity in your part of the world? Because Dean, you're basically saying across the globe, yes, there are bumps. And of course, COVID was a huge one, but across the globe, lifespans are increasing, have the tendency to increase. And it is really interesting. And there were a couple of thoughts on that and comments in the chat already. What happens when we all get older? So when you think about your part in the world, and the Menti link is in the chat right now. And of course, you can also pull out your phone and scan that QR code. We would love to hear from you. What scares you the most when you think about everybody around me is going to be in the 3 digits at some point, maybe turning 101, maybe going up to 120, right? So what is it that worries you the most when you think about that in your part of the world? And Dean, why do you want to know? Why are you asking that question while the first responses are already pouring in?
Yeah, I think we, even in the chat as well, I think that, and these are really insightful comments here, because I think to holistically address longevity, we have to kind of keep the story going, right? I think as people start to live longer and hopefully in a more healthy manner, it changes the whole context of what community looks like. There's this really insightful point about, living longer is nice, but what about our loved ones, right? But at the same time, does living longer have to be exclusive of our loved ones? If we don't practice this as a community? But at the same time, longevity, when, say, prolonged, healthy or unhealthy, the impact on transportation, agriculture, economics, healthcare, obviously, the role of what housing looks like, all of those will be impacted. I think it's natural to think that it's all going to be negatively impacted, or generally speaking, negatively impacted. But at the same time, humanity has done some remarkable things. And I don't even think we've scratched the surface of what some of these solutions will look like. I'm not here to suggest that let's just all live longer. Let's add more years to life and life to years, and let's complete that story. It's far from complete. But at the same time, this is what we do know. If we leave things to kind of how they are now, if you look at some of the countries, you're pushing towards half the population having a chronic disease already by the time they are adolescents. I think that we don't have to try to all live to 120, but I think we do owe our children, our earliest generations, not just seniors, right? We think of longevity as let's help old people live even older and happier. But I think we have young people on the planet that deserve a chance to thrive too. And the way things are going right now, we probably need to do better.
And Johannes, you just wrote a chapter for a scientific book where you sort of used foresight, scenario building, to think about the generation that's coming up right now. And this also ties in with some of the questions that were submitted from the community and the one that we're looking at right now. Sabrina from Canada submitted a question signing up. She said, well, are there places that are less interested in longevity? Are there maybe places that can't even think about it as of now because they have other problems to solve? And I think the chat also resonates, and what just came up here also resonates. So Johannes, what does your foresight say about this, especially on the youngest generation, Gen Alpha?
So just to start in the present, I just with your earlier question, I talked about how we can look at your understanding of longevity. We learn about the future that you imagine for yourself, but we also learn that how you think about the future tells us a lot about how you think about the present, how you feel in the present. And I don't have to go very far from that to find a context where people are not thinking about longevity, and that context is Germany. Like Germany right now has dropped since last year from the middle of the happiness index for the Western countries to the second to last place. So people in Germany are becoming much more unhappy. They are much more, they have much more worries about the future. And they have a much worse life expectancy than most of the rest of Europe. So because we don't have much preventive care, way too many people are dying from cardiovascular diseases, then it should be the case. And it has a lot to do with Germans actually not expecting a better future. We see this in young people picking up smoking again, especially in post-pandemic times. So we see here again the role of images of the future. How do we think about that? And then, so this is what's happening right now. And I see a lot, especially in the chat, about questions like how we live together, like if we're all getting older. I actually think this is exactly the reason what must have happened. Right now, we're thinking about like how old age feels like, and then we're extending this in our mind, like, oh, if everybody lives just longer. But to live longer, we actually have, like Dean suggested, we have to change much more the way we live together. Like, because that's like one of the secrets of the blue zone is that people have much more of a social, of a communal life. The question here, do we have to change the pension system because people get so much older, is we have to change the pension system, not because people get older, because the blue zones show that purpose is such a fundamental aspect of living longer. The feeling to be needed, to be part of the community, to have, even into old age, be part of that. And so what we did for this chapter is, that is a book about Generation Z and their interest in health and healthcare. For the last chapter, we actually looked at Generation Alpha, the ones who are like 5 to 10 years old, and asked us, they are growing up with all of this. They're growing up with rapid climate change. They're growing up with scientific advances in longevity and health span. What does their future, like daily life, look like? And just speculate, just to like provide a different perspective where this could go. And we actually did 2 scenarios. And the first one, it was this hyper individualized, super personalized healthcare. They knew everything about their metabolic health, they knew all their data, they can like tweak it very in detail. But the other scenario was more like they actually moved away from a too hyper-personalized healthcare into a much more communal understanding of much more like taking care of each other. And this is, I think, for me, like one of the key reasons is let's not focus only on technology, also focus on like social life and community.
Mm-hmm. This was actually the most upvoted question when we did the WhatsApp poll from many of you. If billions of people could live significantly longer, what does this mean for the planet? So all you just said wrapped into one question. And Isabella, you said in the very beginning that for you, this topic of longevity sort of stands next to sustainability, is one of these big pillars for the Dubai Future Forum. So Isabella, from your own research perspective, when you hear this question, what does longevity mean for our planet? You're curating the forum right now around longevity. Have you made up your mind around this question already? Have you maybe seen examples of optimism here, that when we all live longer, that we can still share this planet and live this communal life that Johannes just described?
Well, first of all, I think we're still in a phase where we have many more questions than answers. And I think this is very fair to say. And it's also why it's one of the topic of the forum. The forum is never a place where we come with answers that we want to share. It's more a place where we want to discuss, we want to gather information. And, you know, I think there are these 2 sides of the longevity issue. One is this very personal journey to longevity. We heard what Dean was saying, and we heard that many different scientists around the world that are giving advice from a personal perspective. And then there is this community side of longevity. What is the impact on the economics of it, on the sustainability, on the environment around us? I think for us, as Dubai Future Foundation, what is very interesting is to understand what could be a framework of it, far from being just another buzzword. As we heard oftentimes talking about sustainability, and then once again, a lot of critics to the fact that only a rich country can think about being more sustainable because this is something that a poorer country cannot think about. We don't want to have this longevity concept treated as a luxury good, but we believe that there is something in longevity that it could help also in the way we look at the future. So this is why we're very interested in investigating it much more. And all the different aspects that Johannes and Dean touched upon today are going to be part of this big puzzle. I think I can maybe hint to it. I don't want to reveal the title of the session, but we will look at the fact of a utopian and dystopian conception of longevity society. because this is something that is still debated. And I was looking at the questions in the chat. One of them was 100 years old people will be able to have children. And, you know, this is our own questions that really goes into the bucket of a dystopian society. Maybe, I don't know. I can't judge for the next thousands of years how it look like, but this is still debated.
What does the biomedical engineer Dean say to this question? Will 100-year-olds be having babies in the future?
I think it's multifaceted. Our team actually is involved with a center that looks at reproductive longevity, but not from purely the standpoint of people having children longer, but the notion that chronic disease in women is tied to the aging of the reproductive system. Right. So I think that when we think about longevity, and I also noted the question about, you know, having kids is a way to demonstrate longevity. But at the same time, it's not a one-worded conclusion. People are still having kids, but the kids are getting sick earlier at an unprecedented pace. And so I think everything is interconnected. But back to your question, will 100-year-olds have children? It's possible someday. Will 100-year-olds still be working someday? It's possible, and they also may want to still be working, but maybe in a job different from what they did before. I just met with a longevity economist who showed that it's actually people who are in their 50s plus who contribute the most to economies, when a lot of society thinks that when you're hitting the 50s, the late 50s, moving towards 60, that your golden years are kind of done. And so I think that just thinking that people will live longer and then we're going to have a food supply, I think it requires us to think that people living longer is a dramatic shift to kind of the global order that will necessitate dramatic shifts in everything from what we know about work to pensions to the role of the family, et cetera. I think it's not something where we just think in a little piece of a puzzle and then suddenly think that nothing else will change.
What strikes me about this conversation, and I'm so grateful that Isabella just said this, is the question, do we really want to live longer? To me, learning from you means that we have to be very careful in what questions we ask about this topic. There's not an answer to this. It's an invitation to different questions that we maybe have asked before. And I think some of them were in the chat today, and I really appreciate that. And some of them I would have not been able to think about, like the one that Manish just asked about 100-year-olds having children. And it also deals with the fact that we have not enough questions asked about the female health in general. Dean, in your research, this also came out, most of today's health is still focused on the male body, and females are suffering from that. So this is just one little example of how big of a question is behind what was just put in the chat. And Isabella, thank you for inviting these questions to the forum. Thank you for inviting these questions here. And before we say goodbye, we're going to do what all Foresiders love. We're going to share signals. So in the chat, you find a link to our WhatsApp community. This is where we continue the conversation beyond today's session, and where you will also share signals. We'll find the signals that are being shared today. And of course, you will also find these in the Zoom chat right now, so you can open the tab for you. I'm going to put our guests back on stage right now. I'm so excited. What is the latest longevity signal? So this could be an article, a book, a movie, a podcast, a research paper that you would recommend to check out. Isabella, Dean, Johannes, your votes, please. Dean, I'm going to kick it off with you.
I shared earlier a link at the WHO that talks about kind of the key drivers of both health challenges, but also health disparity around the world. And I think the team has that link. I encourage everybody to check it out.
Thank you. Will this chat make us live longer? Manish, yes. A confident yes. Johannes, your longevity signal for us to close out today's session.
Yeah, so I think I already posted it a couple of days ago in the signals chat. There is a documentary on Netflix called Living to 100. that is about the blue zones that have been mentioned again and again here. And I think it's one of the best documentaries to really give you an idea of what these blue zones are about and what their secrets are and how diverse the reasons for people living a lot longer or more people living longer or to 100. I think it's really helpful. It's also really interesting because they try out some of the patterns in on a small city in the US, and that has a huge influence there. So it also is very hopeful because it shows that you could actually apply that to a community. And I think once again the community aspect is the really important one.
Ah, that sounds great. Yeah, maybe we all turn our communities into blue zones eventually, where people actually want to live longer because of the surroundings they're in. Isabella, not easy to follow up on these recommendations, especially on a non-dystopian one, but maybe you have something for us.
Well, and plus with this soundtrack, Forever Young, makes it even more dramatic. Now, I think from my side, I would recommend the book Ikigai, that is the Japanese take on how to get a reason for living. And very interesting, very interesting. And you know, just started the book, so I cannot give any spoiler better this way, but definitely worth checking.
Fantastic. And Manish just put in the chat, time for a run after the Zoom call. What a good idea, Manish. Maybe you should have a Dubai Future Horizons run club. Here's an idea for the forum this year, Isabella, to even add longevity to a conference when you're there in person. And I just want to give a huge shout out to our guests today, Isabella, Dean, and Johannes. Amazing insights and so many learnings and great questions. I'm still processing the second community question slide where there was so much happening at the same time. We will share this with all of you. Huge shout out to Liz, our fearless producer, to Jade, who made it for the live mindfulness moment. Of course, to Jalisa, aka DJ Hourglass, to Tim, who was our live stream producer and specialist today, and to Iman, Inas, Hessa, Yamna, the entire Dubai Future Foundation team that is behind Horizons. Thank you all. And most importantly, thank you all for taking the time from so many places around the world, London, Dubai, Atlanta, Calgary, Kenya, Bali, truly global community. And I'm proud to say that we will be back in October for you with Dubai Future Horizons. And until then, go for a run and unmute now to say goodbye to one another in whatever language you prefer while the final song is rolling in. Auf Wiedersehen on Horizons. Thank you all for being here.